3 years old, I was living in Budapest, Hungary. And so before the Russians came in and took over Hungary, we had to put a factory on a train to take it out to Poland. And we started out and traveled all through Europe. Finally went to Poland with a train. And when we get there, by the time we get there, the Russians was coming into Poland. So after that, they decided to take the factory out to Germany. So we lived on a train again, stayed on a train for a long time. Almost 2 years we lived on a train. And while traveling, we had every time the planes were flying over to bomb someplace, we had to stop the train and run off away from it. My bed was on a luggage rack above the seats, and we had a stove in a corner where my mother was cooking the food. Very exciting, but also very scary, because there is a bombing and people were blowing up the rails, and there was one time we were outside of Berlin, and American and English planes were flying overhead, a whole bunch of them. So we had to stop the train, and everybody was running off the train. And about half an hour later, we were pulling into Berlin, but there was no more station. The bombers bombed the whole city and the whole railroad station, so we had to backtrack for almost 400 or 500 miles to go around. Well, our family had our own car, like a passenger car for the railroad, and the rest of the people was a little more crowded, but we were pretty comfortable. I remember a lot of things when we were attacked by the partisans, and we had to fight our way out of Poland because the Russians were almost took the train away from us. So my father and the people that was working on a factory had to fight against them. And one time the Germans tried to take the engine away from us because they were running away from Poland too, so they tried to take the engine away. People on the train had to fight them to keep the engine so we don't get stuck in Poland. Mostly were just sitting by the window and looking outside and enjoying the view. I love the train and I still love the train. When we were in the Black Forest, and that small city where we set the factory up, and we constantly would go out and pick berries or just go over the mountains, and we really had a nice time. Yeah, eventually we ended up in Germany in a Black Forest area, and the trains were pulled into like a siding, and in a very small town that was making glass. It was actually a glass factory, and that's where we set up the machines for the factory. And we were there for almost a year, still living on a train, but even so that the trains were just stationary. And then at the end, the American troops came in to take over the town, and my father and mother decided to go back to Hungary. So we still, on the way home, we still lived on a train, but going from camp to camp like a displaced person. There was a lot of them during the war. 2 years, about 2 years. 3 when it started, and it was 5 when we finally got back to Hungary. Yes, on the way back, when after the war was over, we became displaced persons. Where my father decided to go back to Hungary because one of my brothers was lost in the war, and they wouldn't just take us back straight to Hungary from Germany. We had to go from one camp to the other as a displaced persons. A lot of millions of people were displaced by the war, and the camps that we went to were the camps where actually the Jewish people was put to death. Some of the places they still had the chambers, the gas chambers, and it was a terrible thing to see. For a couple of weeks at a time.
How many concentration camps did you live in?
3. First name Ferenc.
Okay.
Barabás Ferenc.